He did not open the envelope because he thought it was a mistake. He opened it because Ansel Dragomir had never, in 9 years, let a document reach his hands unopened. 3 winters into a marriage arranged to end a war, his wife had filed to dissolve it, and she had done it without a lawyer of her own, without a claim, without asking him for a single thing. When he finally found the address where she had been sleeping for 3 weeks, he expected to find another man there. What he found in that narrow rented room did not just end the divorce. It made him take his own house apart, board by board, with his hands. The room smelled of turpentine and cold stone, and Ansel had been standing in it without moving for 2 hours. He knew the exact figure because there was a clock on the mantel behind the painter, a heavy brass thing his grandfather had taken out of a customs house in another country, and Ansel had watched its reflection in the tall window opposite him the entire morning. He was not permitted to turn his head. Otmar had explained this at the start with the particular patience of a man who has spent his life telling powerful people to stay still. The light came in from the north. The light was the only thing in the house that Otmar could not buy, order, or threaten, and so the light decided everything. Ansel stood with his weight on his back foot and his right hand resting on the carved head of a chair, wearing a coat cut so close to the body that it took 2 fittings to hide the shoulder rig underneath. He had refused to take the rig off, Otmar had asked. Ansel had looked at him until the question dissolved. "The hand," Otmar murmured. "You are closing it again." Ansel opened his fingers. The knuckles were wrong for the coat and always had been. The middle 2 on the right thickened where they had been broken and reset badly when he was 19. Otmar had painted them faithfully, which was so far the only thing about the portrait Ansel liked. Vesna Dragomir sat with her ankles crossed and a leather folder open on her knees, and she had not looked at the painting once. She was looking at a seating chart. The house had been in her family before it had been in his father's, and she moved through it the way weather moves through a valley, without hurry and without asking. "The frame," she said. "Not gold. Everyone does gold now. Every new family with a shipping contract and a bad haircut puts gold on the walls." "Walnut," Otmar said. "Waxed, not lacquered. Walnut? And it hangs in the long room, opposite your father, so that when people come up the stairs on the night of the anniversary, they see the 2 of you before they see anything else. That is the whole point of the evening. They walk up those stairs and they understand that nothing has changed." "Something has changed," Ansel said. "My father is dead, which is exactly why they need to be told nothing has." She turned a page. "Sabin wants the Halloran delegation seated near the doors. I think that is cowardly. We seat them at the center table and let them eat off our plates." Ansel said nothing. The tension had begun at the base of his skull around the 2nd hour and was spreading over the crown of his head in a slow, tightening band. He had been running the harbor for 9 years. Before that, he had been the thing his father sent when a man needed reminding of something. Now there were entire weeks in which he did not touch anything real. He signed. He nodded. He sat at tables and let other men talk themselves into positions from which there was only one honorable exit. It worked. The harbor had not seen a body come up against the pylons in 3 years, and everyone agreed that this was because of the treaty, and that the treaty held because of the marriage. "Where is your wife?" Otmar asked. The brush kept moving. He asked it lightly, the way a man asks about weather in a country not his own. "She was asked," Vesna said. Before Ansel could answer, she was asked twice. She said she did not want to be painted. That is unusual. Vesna turned another page. "She is very good at rooms. She is not good at being looked at, and I have never decided whether that is modesty or something else." Ansel found that he had closed his hand again. He did not correct it this time. He was thinking, without meaning to, about a night 3 winters back, not long after the wedding when the 2 of them had been driven out to the breakwater for some function, and had ended up at the rail in the dark waiting for the car. She had been wearing his coat over her shoulders because she had not brought one, and the water was doing the thing it does at that hour, going from gray to nothing. she had said, without turning her head. Do you actually like the sea, or were you only born beside it? He had not answered. He remembered deciding not to. He remembered thinking it was the kind of question people asked when they wanted to be interesting, and that he had married a stranger for the good of the harbor and did not owe her the inside of his head. The car had come. She had never asked him anything like it again, not once in 3 years, and he had not noticed until this moment, standing in a cold room, with his hand closed around the head of a chair. He tried to remember the last time he had been in a room with her without a reason. A dinner, a signature, a car ride to a funeral. He could not find one. How much longer? He said. 20 minutes on the coat. The face I can do from the study. 10. Ansel said, and did not move again. The knock came at the 18th minute, which was close enough. It was not a servant's knock. Ansel knew every knock in that house, the way he knew the sound of the gate. This one was 3 flat strikes, with the flat of a hand, not the knuckles. A man announcing that he did not want to be there. Come, Vesna said. Perenadakunle came in with rain, still on the shoulders of his coat, and did not take the coat off, and that told Ansel more than anything the man said in the next 4 minutes. Perrin had been the family's lawyer for 11 years. A large, slow, careful man, who had once sat in a federal building for 9 hours without producing a single sentence of use to anybody, and Ansel had trusted him ever since. He carried a brown envelope in both hands, held slightly out from his body, the way a man carries something that has gone off. Ansel, he said. I did not know until 40 minutes ago, Perrin said. It did not come through our office. It came from the county, because my name is on the marriage filing, and the moment I saw it, I got in the car. Ansel stepped down off the platform. Otmar made a small sound of protest, and thought better of it. Give it to me. The paper inside was cheap county stock, the gray recycled kind, with flecks in it. Ansel read the caption line and then read it again, and the room went a long way off, the turpentine, the ticking, all of it retreating to the edges of a tunnel. A petition for dissolution of marriage, filed 11 days ago. Filed in person, at the counter, by the petitioner herself, Izora Dragomir. There is more, Perrin said quietly. Ansel turned the page. She had filed alone. No firm, no council of record, no address for service, but a post office box out past the rail yards. And in the section where a petitioner sets out what she wants, where in 9 cases out of 10, there is a list running to 4 pages, there were 2 lines. The petitioner seeks no division of marital property. The petitioner seeks no support of any kind. Ansel read it 3 times. She is asking for nothing, he said. She is asking for nothing, Perrin agreed. In 26 years I have never seen a filing like this. Women in her position do not walk into a county office alone. They come with 3 lawyers, an evaluation of the shipping interest, and they start at half. Then she is being made to do it. That was my first thought. It is not consistent with the handwriting. The whole thing is filled out by hand and filled out correctly, which almost nobody manages. Whoever did this understood exactly what she was signing away. Vesna had put down the seating chart. She had gone very still on the sofa, and when she spoke, her voice had lost every ounce of the warmth she used on painters and caterers. Then, let her have it, she said. Sign it. Ansel looked up. Sign it, his mother repeated. This is the best outcome available. She wants nothing. She walks out with what she walked in with, which is a suitcase and a foreign birth record. The treaty was signed 6 months before that girl ever came into this house, and it does not have her name on it. We put out that it was mutual, and by spring there are 4 families in this city who would put a daughter in that seat and thank us for the chance. She has not been in this house in weeks, Ansel said. She has been gone considerably longer than that, Vesna said. You simply were not looking. Something in the room changed temperature. Explain that. His mother set the folder aside, and for the first time that morning, looked directly at him. She stopped coming down to dinner in the autumn. You were told she had a stomach complaint, And you accepted it, because it was convenient, because you were in Rotterdam and then you were in the hearings. She let her own girl go in November, and would not take another. She stopped using the car. In January, she asked that her things go to the East Rooms, and that nobody go in there but her. And the housekeeper came to me and I said, fine, let her have her privacy. Ansel had gone very cold. When did you last see her face? He said. Vesna hesitated. It was a small hesitation. He had seen his mother lie to federal agents without one. February, she said. It is April. She was in the house. You just said, no one was permitted in those rooms. Ansel. You are telling me, he said, and his voice dropped into the register that made grown men look for the doors, that my wife lived in this house for 2 months, and nobody in it saw her, and the first anyone mentions it is the morning her name comes back out of a county building. Nobody answered him. Ansel put the papers down on the arm of the chair. Perrin, get me the box number and whatever the county has for a service address. They have nothing. That is the point of a box, then I will get it another way. Send Bram, Vesna said. Send anyone. Ansel, you cannot be seen out past the rail yards 2 weeks before the anniversary, chasing a woman who has already told the county in writing that she does not want your money. He was already pulling the coat off. He handed it to Otmar, who took it the way you take something from a fire. She is my wife, Ansel said. She is a clause, his mother said. He stopped at the door. Then explain to me why a clause gives back everything she is owed, and disappears 2 weeks before I am supposed to stand at the top of those stairs, and let this city look at me. Behind him he heard the small dry sound of Otmar setting his brush down at last. He got as far as the front hall. Bram Ostrowski was standing under the arch with his phone in his hand, and the look on his face stopped Ansel where he was, because Bram had driven for him for 6 years, and had a face like a shut door, and it was not shut now. Get the car is running. Listen to me first. Bram lowered the phone. 2 minutes ago a courier came to the north gate, not a company. A kid on a bicycle, paid in cash by someone he could not describe. He would not come inside. He handed it to Karim at the gate and rode off. He held out a small padded envelope, unmarked, already opened. You opened it. I open everything. Bram did not apologize. Boss, it is a key. Ansel took the envelope and tipped it into his palm. It was a brass key, worn shiny on the bit, the kind that opens a lock in a building, not touched since the war. Attached with a loop of wire was a paper tag, and on it someone had written an address past the rail yards. In ink, in a hand that was steady and unhurried and did not care who read it. Underneath the address were 8 words. Go ahead. Bring her home if you can. Ansel stood in the hall his grandfather had bought with other people's money, and looked at the key, and felt the floor move under him. There is a name on the back, Bram said. He turned the tag over. There was no signature. There was only a line drawing, done in the same ink, of a heron standing in shallow water with its head turned to the side. Ansel had seen that heron 100 times. It was pressed into the wax on every letter out of the house on the far side of the harbor, and stamped on the side of every crate off the Halloran docks. It had been on the lid of the box that arrived at his father's funeral, with a bottle of brandy inside, and a card that said only with sympathy, which had been at the time the most frightening thing anyone had ever sent him. Emmerich Halloran had known where she was before her own husband did, and had sat on it long enough to have a key cut, and had sent it across the water on a bicycle on the morning the papers came, with an invitation attached. Boss, Bram said carefully. What do you want to do? Ansel closed his hand around the key until the wire tag cut into his palm. I want you to drive, he said. The rain had thinned to something colder than rain by the time they cleared the last of the good streets. Ansel sat behind Bram with the key in his fist and the tag turning against his palm, and watched the city change through the glass. It changed the way it always did, in stages, like a man taking off a suit. The long white terraces above the water with their iron balconies, the banks and the shipping offices with their brass plates. The arterial road running north with the container cranes standing off to the right like something extinct. Then the rail yards, and after the rail yards the city stopped pretending. Out here, the buildings were low, and brick, and streaked black, where a century of coal smoke had settled into the mortar, and half of them had been carved into rooms, 6 different lives behind one facade. "Boss," Bram said. In December, she started asking me to drive her to a pharmacy across the river, not the one on the square. She wanted me to park 2 streets away and wait, and I did not ask, because she never asked me for anything, 4 times. The last time she came back and could not get the door open. Her hands were not working. He paused. I thought I was the only one who knew. I thought that was worth something. It is worth nothing at all. Ansel did not answer him. He was doing arithmetic instead, and he did not like where it came out. December. Twice in January. The first week of February. And in the second week of February, he had stood beside her in a paneled room at the harbor board, while a notary went through 11 pages of lease renewal. And she had signed each page where the little flag stickers told her to, and she had been wearing gloves. Gray suede gloves, indoors, at a table, with the radiators going so hard that 2 of the board members had taken their jackets off. He had noticed. That was the part that sat in him now like something swallowed the wrong way. What he had thought about it was that women did things with clothes that men did not understand, and that his wife had cold hands, and that the notary was taking too long. She had signed with the pen held in a fist rather than in her fingers. He had watched her do it, and he had looked at his watch. Afterward in the corridor, she had said, "Do you have 20 minutes?" That was all. She had asked it in the same voice she used to tell him the car was downstairs, and he had said, "Not today," and had put his hand out for the folder she was carrying, and she had given it to him and said of course, and that was the last conversation he had ever had with his wife. 20 minutes. She had been asking for 20 minutes. He put his head back against the rest. And let the ugliest version come, because the ugliest version was the one that made him feel like something other than a fool. Halloran had the key. Halloran had known the address before anybody in the Dragomir house did. There had been a war, and then a treaty, and a treaty is only ever a longer way of doing the same thing, and the surest instrument anyone ever invented for the destruction of a house was a woman placed inside it. She had come to them through brokers. 3 winters ago she had arrived with a suitcase and a birth record from a country that had changed its name twice, and references that Perrin had verified in a single afternoon, which at the time had seemed like efficiency and now seemed like a very short afternoon indeed. And now, with every family in the city about to walk up his staircase, she had removed herself from the marriage in a way that made it impossible for anyone to say she had been thrown out. Waived every claim so that no court would ever compel her to testify about the value of anything. And gone to ground in a room whose key was in the hand of Merrick Halloran. It was a good theory. It was clean. It explained everything except the gloves. His phone went off against his ribs. He looked at it. Sabin. He let it ring twice before he answered, which was 2 rings longer than he had ever let his brother wait. Ansel, Sabin's voice came through warm and unhurried, the voice he used on juries and on their mother. Perrin has just called me sounding like a man having a heart attack in a wardrobe. Are you all right? Where did you hear it, Perrin? I just said before Perrin. He came straight from the county and told me to my face he had not called you. There was the smallest pause on the line. It might have been the tunnel under the yards. It might not have been. I have been paying a woman in the clerk's office $200 a month since before you took the chair. You approved it, he had. It was also the fastest complete answer his brother had ever given to any question in his life. Come back to the house, Sabin said. Let me send someone with a checkbook and a plane ticket, and let her sign and go. And in 6 weeks, nobody remembers her name. If one person sees Ansel Dragomir out past the yards, knocking on doors, the story is not that your wife left. It is that she left and you could not take it. One of those is a marriage ending. The other is blood in the water. She waved everything. Ansel said. Nobody does that. Guilty people do that. His brother said. Guilty people give things back. The car slowed. Bram was leaning over the wheel, looking up at the numbers on the brick. I have to go, Ansel said. And if you send anybody out here, anybody at all, I will know within the hour, and you and I will have a different conversation. He hung up. Bram pulled in at the curb and killed the engine, and looked up through the streaming glass at the building. Ansel opened the door. The rain took him across the shoulders as he crossed the pavement. The door had been a good one once, oak, with a fanlight over it, and somebody had put chipboard across the lower half and painted the whole thing a municipal green that had gone chalky. There was no bell, only a row of names on cards behind cracked plastic, written over so many times that they were just gray. He did not look for hers. She would not be on it. The key went in and turned as if it had been cut yesterday, because it had. Inside, the hall was warm, which he had not expected. Warm and close and smelling of frying onion and wet wool. A pram was chained to the newel post. Somewhere above him a television was playing to an audience, and the audience laughed, and a woman told it to be quiet in a language he did not know. He went up. The stairs turned 4 times, and the carpet gave out on the second landing. On the 3rd floor, a door opened 2 inches on a chain, and an old woman looked out at him, and something went over her face that was not fear. It was recognition. Out here, past the yards, an 81-year-old woman looked at his coat and his knuckles, and knew his name, and shut the door very softly and slid the bolt. The room was at the top, under the roof. He stood outside it with his hand flat on the wood. There was no sound inside. He could hear his own coat dripping onto the boards. He knocked once, did not wait, and let himself in. It was so cold that his breath caught. The window was open, a sash window in the gable, propped with a paperback, in April, in the rain. The curtain moving in and out with a wet slapping sound against the frame. The room was under the slope of the roof, so that a grown man could stand upright only in the middle third of it, and it was empty, not empty of things, empty of her. He turned in the small space, and could not find one object that told him a woman lived there. No photographs. No books except the one holding the window. A folding camp cot with an army surplus sleeping bag on it, one pillow with no case, a gray blanket, folded at the foot with a squared edge like something in a barracks. A nail behind the door, with 2 shirts on it, and the coat she had worn to his father's memorial, 1 pair of shoes under the cot, the toes lined up. There was no mirror, there was no food. He found himself standing at the little sink in the corner, opening the cupboard above it, and the cupboard held 4 things: a box of salt, a jar of instant coffee, a packet of plain crackers with the paper folded down and clipped, and a stack of clean folded towels, far more towels than a person needs, a dozen at least, laundered and squared, a dozen towels, and no food. Ansel's hands had gone cold. He turned around. The whole of the rest of the room was one long trestle table, under the slope of the roof, and the table was the only thing in that room that anyone had spent money on, and it was covered, bottles. Small brown glass bottles with screw caps, standing in ranks 4 rows deep, 40 or 50 of them, each with a strip of masking tape on it, each strip written in a small upright hand he had seen on birthday cards and on the flags of a lease renewal. He picked one up. East Corridor Radiator, it said. 3rd of January, 2nd draw. He put it down and picked up another. Kitchen tap, cold, after flush. 6th of January, another. Her own bedroom, bath tap, the 9th, and again on the 14th, and again on the 22nd. There were envelopes stacked at the end of the table, the stiff, padded kind, printed with the name of an analytical laboratory 400 miles away. Some were sealed and stamped and waiting to go. Some had been opened and the reports pulled out and clipped and stacked in a shoebox with the lid off. And on top of the shoebox, in a cracked white saucer, lay her wedding ring. Ansel stood very still in the middle of that freezing room with a brown bottle in his hand, and the rain coming in through a window a dying woman had propped open, because she wanted air, and understood all at once that his wife had not been running from him. She had been testing his house. That was when he heard the water. It came from the far end of the corridor, a tap running, and under it a sound he could not name, because it did not belong to any part of his life. Small, rhythmic. Somebody trying very hard to be quiet. He was down the corridor without any memory of deciding to move. The bathroom at the end was shared. The door stood ajar, because the latch had been taken off it, and a bar of yellow light lay across the boards. Isora was on the floor. She was kneeling on a folded towel with a basin in front of her, her left hand braced flat against the tiles, and her right holding her hair back off her face, riding out a wave of whatever the illness was doing to her, in a terrible practiced silence. She was wearing a man's undershirt and cotton trousers, and there was nothing to her at all. He could see the shape of every vertebra through the cotton. The hair she was holding back had come away in her fist, a whole soft, loose bank of it lying against her wrist, and she did not appear to have noticed, or had noticed weeks ago, and stopped reacting. On the tiles beside her knee sat a plastic bottle of drinking water, a wristwatch face up, and a school exercise book open to a page, ruled into columns. She was timing it and writing it down. The wave passed. She stayed where she was, with her head down, breathing shallow and careful. Then she reached out, without looking, turned the watch to see it, and wrote something in the second column with a pencil stub, and her hand shook so badly that the pencil went through the paper. Ansel had put 6 men in the ground. He had stood in a kill room in the 2nd year of the war and made himself unclench his jaw before he spoke, so nobody would hear it in his voice. He could not move. His hands hung at his sides, and he could not make himself go in, because going in meant that this was real. She saw his shoes. Isara went still. Then she straightened up slowly, put the back of her wrist against her mouth, and turned her head and looked at her husband for the first time in 2 months. Her eyes were the only thing left of her. They were exactly the same. "You are letting the heat out," she said. Her voice had been sanded down to almost nothing. She reached past him, pushed the door wider so that he had to step in, and turned the tap off. And the silence came down over the two of them, like a dropped sheet. "There is a woman on the 2nd floor with a baby," she said. "The heat goes up the stairwell and out of any door you leave open. So come in or go out, Ansel, but do not stand there." He came in and got down on the wet tiles beside her, which ruined the trousers, and he did not notice that for another 2 hours. "How long?" he said. His voice came out wrong, too loud, too flat, cracking on the second word like a boy's. Isora reached over and closed the exercise book, and put her hand flat on the cover as if to keep it shut. "Do not shout in here," she said. "The walls are paper and everyone on this floor has already been kind to me." "Isora, how long?" She looked at him, and whatever she saw in his face made something in hers give, very slightly, at the corners, the first crack in 3 years, of a perfectly maintained surface. "Since about the middle of October," she said. He understood every word of it, and still, the only thing his mind could produce, standing in the wreckage of everything he had believed about his own house, was a sentence with no shape to it at all. "I did," Isara said. "In February in the corridor at the harbor board. I asked you for 20 minutes. The tap dripped twice into the basin. Then she said, quite calmly, 'Who gave you the key to my room?'" Ansel took it out of his pocket and put it on the tiles between them, tag up the heron facing her. He watched what was left of the color go out of her face. "Oh?" Isora said softly. She was already reaching for the edge of the sink to pull herself up. "Oh, no, Isora, get my shoes," she said. "Get my shoes and get the shoebox off the table. Not the bottles, The shoebox. If he sent you that this morning, then he wanted you here, and if he wanted you here, he wanted you here now, and that means we have about 40 minutes. 40 minutes until what? She got her feet under her, holding the sink with both hands, and looked at him with the terrible clear-eyed patience of a woman who had done all of the thinking on this subject months ago, and alone. Until your brother finds out, you did not go home, she said. She could not stand for more than a few seconds at a time, and she was furious about it. Ansel understood that within the first minute, because she made 3 attempts to reach the basin and carry it to the sink herself, and on the third, her knees folded, and she sat down hard on the edge of the bath and put her hand over her eyes. "Leave it," she said. "I will do it in a minute." He did not answer. He put his coat around her shoulders, and then he knelt down on the wet floor of a shared bathroom in a rented house, past the rail yards, and did it himself. He rinsed the basin and scrubbed it out with the block of green soap on the ledge, and wiped the tiles. He wrung the towel out under the hot tap until the water ran clear and hung it over the rail, and squared the corner, without thinking, because that was how she had folded the ones in the cupboard. "You have never cleaned anything in your life," she said at last. "I cleaned a garage floor every Sunday until I was 17, my father's. Things happened in it." She was quiet after that. "How much do you weigh?" "Do not, Isara." "I stopped getting on the scale in February," she said, "because it stopped being information and started being a mood. Ask me something useful." So he asked her the useful thing. "What is in the bottles?" She looked at him for a long moment. Then she reached out and pulled the exercise book onto her knees, and opened it and turned it around so he could see, and her hands were shaking so consistently that the pages made a small papery noise like something breathing. "Water," she said. "Dust. Scrapings off a radiator. A pinch out of every jar in the pantry. 2 ounces off the bottom of the wine that was decanted on the 6th of November because I wanted to rule it out. There is a laboratory in the north that does soil and building surveys for insurance companies. They do not ask who you are. You post them a sample and a money order, and a month later you get a sheet of paper with numbers on it." "Numbers of what?" "I did not know at first. That is what makes it slow. You cannot ask a laboratory what is wrong with you. You have to already suspect and pay for the suspicion, and then pay again for the next one." She turned a page. "Arsenic in October. Clean. Lead in November, because the pipes in that house are older than the country. Clean. Mercury, at the end of November. And by then, I had lost the feeling in the last 2 toes on my left foot and had begun to think I was simply going mad. And then, in December, I woke up, and there was hair on the pillow. A quantity. And I sat there in the dark, holding it, and I thought, this is a very old thing that is happening to me." She looked up. "Thallium," she said. Ansel did not know very much about poison. He knew what a knife does to the inside of a forearm. He had never in his life had cause to think about a word like that. And hearing her say it in a bathroom with a dripping tap was one of the strangest moments of his existence. "They found it," he said. "In the house. Everywhere they looked, they found nothing." Isora said. "That is the part that nearly killed me before the metal did. Every water sample came back clean, every dust sample. The wine, clean. The salt, clean. 16 weeks and $600 of my own money on samples, out of every tap and jar and vent in a house with 50 rooms in it, and all of it clean, and me losing my hair in handfuls and not able to hold a fork." She set the book down. "So in January I stopped testing the house and started testing me, and then I asked the question I should have asked in October. What is the only thing in that house that goes into me and into nobody else?" The cold came up through Ansel's knees and into his stomach. "The tea," he said. Isara closed her eyes. "The tea," she agreed. He could see it, and the seeing made him want to put his hand through the wall. The black lacquer caddy on the shelf in her sitting room. His mother had given it to her in the first month of the marriage, in front of people at a lunch, with a small speech about how a woman ought to have one thing in a house that belonged to her alone and was not to be touched. It was the single warmest thing Vesna Dragomir had ever done for her son's wife, and Isora had kept it filled and drunk it, every morning and every night, for 3 years, alone, because it was hers and because it was the only thing in 50 rooms that was. 6 weeks, Isara said. I sent a sample on the 2nd of February, and the report came back on the 15th of March, flagged in red, with a note in pen at the bottom from somebody 400 miles away, asking whether the sample was industrial in origin, because they had never had a domestic one like it. And you did not call me. No, Isora, I did not call you, she said, because by then I had spent 4 months learning who fills that caddy. The housekeeper fills it, Isora said. On the 1st of every month, from a sealed tin that comes to the kitchen door by hand, not by post, and not by the grocer, because the household has used the same importer for years, and everyone in that kitchen would tell you it is a tradition, and be genuinely pleased about it. She let out a breath. The importer is a company on the North Quay, called Velicor Trading. It brings in tea, coffee, cocoa, and dried fruit. Your brother has held 60% of it since the year your father died. Ansel sat down on the wet floor, with his back against the door, and stayed there for some time. You have proof of the ownership, he said, eventually. I have a share register anyone can buy for $20. That proves he owns a business that imports tea. It does not prove he put anything in it. She said it without heat. The way you read out a total. That is the entire problem. A report on a caddy. A delivery that has come to that door for years. A brother-in-law with a warehouse. Put those 3 in front of any man in this city, and he will say the woman is sick and frightened and has done what frightened people do, which is find a shape in the dark and give it a name. I would not have said that. She looked at him. You would have said it, Isora said gently, and you would have said it kindly. You would have said, you are unwell, let me get you a doctor. And the doctor would have been one of ours, and we would have sat down in your study, you and me, and Sabin. And you would have said, my brother, my wife is ill, and saying strange things about your company, and I need you to help me look after her. The tap dripped. And I would have been dead inside a month, she said, and you would have grieved and believed every word of it, and Sabin would have carried the coffin. Ansel looked at the ceiling of that bathroom and understood that his wife had run the whole of this through, from beginning to end, alone, in a freezing room, with a basin and a school exercise book, and had come out of it at the only door that was open. So you filed, he said. So I filed. Explain it to me. All of it. Slowly. Isora wrapped his coat tighter around herself. She had begun to shiver, and it was not entirely the cold. What ended the war, she said, was not the wedding. What ended the war was the Deepwater lease. Your father and Emmer Calloran's father were never going to agree on who held it, so the board put it in a joint tenancy that could not be broken by a death. 2 names. Yours and your wife's. If you die, it goes whole to her. If she dies, it goes whole to you. Neither house can take it by removing one person, because removing one person only makes the other stronger. That is the lock. That is the actual treaty. The marriage is only the hinge it hangs on. I signed those pages, Ansel said slowly. In February, you signed them beside me, 11 pages, and neither of us read one word of them, because the notary was taking too long. Something like a smile went across her face and did not stay. So think about it as a man who wants the harbor. You cannot kill Ansel, because then the whole lease sits with a widow, and a widow can sell it to Halloran on a Tuesday afternoon out of spite. So, the widow goes first. And she cannot be shot, because a Dragomir wife shot in the street brings the port authority and the federal people down on all of it in a week. She has to sicken. Slowly, unremarkably, in a good bed with a doctor in the room, and everyone must be very sorry. And then there is one name on that lease, and one man standing between you and it, and one is a much easier number than 2. And the divorce, Ansel said. Read the reversion clause, Isora said. If the marriage is dissolved, the lease does not go to you, and it does not go to me. It goes into escrow at the board for 10 years, and neither house can touch it or borrow against it or sell it. It becomes worth nothing to anybody alive today. She lifted her chin. I could not prove who is killing me. I could not stop them, but I could make it pointless. You gave away the harbor, Ansel said. I gave away a reason, she said. Those are not the same thing. You gave away everything you were owed, every claim. You walked into a county office by yourself and signed away a fortune. Because any claim I kept would have kept my interest alive, Isora said. And any interest alive would have kept me worth killing. And I did not want you standing over a hole in the ground in 6 weeks with the whole city watching, being told by your brother that you had been a very good husband. Ansel found he could not speak. Also, she said. And now her voice did finally go just slightly, just at the edges. If I asked for money, you would have thought it was about money. And I have spent 3 years in your house being a clause, and I did not want the last thing you ever knew about me to be a number. He got up and crossed the bathroom in 1 step, and did not touch her, because he had not touched her in 3 years, and did not have the right to start in a room where she could not stand. He crouched instead so his eyes were level with hers. Where's the caddy now? He said. On the shelf in my sitting room, where it has been since the first month I lived there. Full. I refilled it on the 1st of March out of the tin, so that nothing would look different, and I left it. And I left the reports in the shoebox, and I walked out of that house, on the 22nd of March, with a bag, and I have been here since. It is still there. It is still there, she said, which is the only thing in the world I have that is worth anything, and it is sitting in a house I cannot go back into. Ansel stood up. He took his phone out and he called Perrin Adekonle, and he did not lower his voice at all. Where are you? In the car outside the county building. Ansel, I have found something on Aldous, and I do not think you are going to like it. Later. Get out here. Bring the acceptance of service, and whatever the county needs, from a respondent. And bring a notary, if you have to put one in the boot. There was a silence of about 2 seconds. Ansel, Perrin said carefully. You are asking me to bring you the papers to consent to your own divorce. Yes. We have 30 days. If you sign a consent today, with no settlement and not a single term, there is no undoing it. The lease reverts. That is 9 figures walking out of your hands this afternoon, and it never comes back. I know what it does, Ansel said. Do you know what your brother will say? I am counting on it, Ansel said. 2 hours, Perrin. He hung up. Isora was staring at him. You cannot, she said. If you sign it now, before any of this can be proved, then you have given up the largest asset your family owns on the word of a woman who is out of her mind with metal poisoning and living in a rented room. That is what your mother will say, and what the board will say, and what the Hallorans will say. And they will not be wrong to say it. They will be wrong, Ansel said. They will simply be reasonable. That is worse? Yes. He was pulling the shoebox toward him, seeing the pages of numbers with the red flag on the last one. Isora, you have been trying for 6 months to make yourself worthless to kill, and it has not worked, because you cannot dissolve a marriage on your own. It takes 2. You have been holding that door, and I have been on the other side of it, with my hand on the latch all winter not looking, so I am going to sign it. Today. And the moment I do, there is no widow, there is no lease, and there is no reason on this earth for anybody to open your door. And the harbor goes in a box at the board for 10 years, Ansel said, where nobody can reach it. Which is what you wanted. It is not what you want. Ansel looked at her. I have wanted that harbor since I was 19, he said. I have hurt people for it. I stood still in a cold room this morning, so a Dutchman could paint me, looking like a man who owns it. And I would burn every plank of it, in front of this whole city, before I let it be. The reason you died on the floor of a rented room out past the yards. She turned her face away, and he saw the tendons standing out in her neck and understood that she was crying and had chosen not to be watched. He turned around and looked out of the little window at the rain over the yards until she was finished. Perrin came in 90 minutes, with rain on his shoulders, and a notary, who did not once ask what she was looking at. They did it on the third-floor landing, because there was no room upstairs, and because Rosanna Aldous opened her door and said, in a voice like a rusted hinge, that they could use the table by her window if they wiped their feet, and stood beside it with her arms folded like a woman guarding a christening. Ansel signed on the lid of the shoebox, because the table was covered in geraniums, and nobody wanted to move them. He signed the acceptance of service, he signed the consent. He initialed the reversion clause on the last page, and Perrin, who had never once said a personal word in Ansel's hearing, put his large hand flat on the paper for a second before lifting it away, as if laying something down. The notary stamped it. It took 11 seconds. That was the harbor gone. 9 years and a war and 9 figures. Gone in 11 seconds on a landing that smelled of geraniums and boiled water. Ansel called his mother. She answered on the first ring. Sabin says you have gone out to the yards. I am telling you now that if you bring that woman back into this house before the anniversary, I will not be responsible for what I say to her. There is no anniversary, Ansel said. Cancel the dinner. Cancel the flowers, the seating, the walnut frame. Nobody comes up those stairs this month. 400 people have been invited. Mother, one question, and think before you answer it. The caddy you gave Isora in the first month, the tea in it, where does it come from? A pause, and in it he heard the whole architecture of his mother's mind moving, and heard, distinctly, the moment it arrived somewhere and stopped. Sabin arranges it, Vesna said. He has always arranged it. Do not tell him, I asked. He put the phone in his pocket. Then he did the other thing, the one he had been turning over since the bathroom floor. He took the signet off his right hand. It was a flat oval of gold with a fouled anchor cut into it, and it was not jewelry. It was the seat. Any man carrying it could stand up in the chamber at the harbor board and be recognized and be heard, and his father had worn it for 31 years. He put it into Isora's palm and closed her fingers around it, and that was the first time he had touched his wife in 3 years. That is a seat at the board, she said. It is a piece of gold that let whoever holds it stand up and be listened to. You are the only person in this city with anything worth saying. He let go. Do not lose it. It does not come with a receipt. Isora sat on the edge of an old woman's chair with her husband's ring in her fist and her husband's coat around her shoulders. And no husband, legally, as of 11 seconds ago. You are going to regret this by Thursday, she said. Probably. Can you walk? No. Then put your arms around my neck, he said. We are not spending another night in this building. He did not take her to the house. That argument lasted 4 minutes, and Bram settled it by saying flatly that he would not drive her through those gates, and that if the boss ordered him to, he would resign in the vehicle. They went instead to rooms above a chandlery on the North Quay, over a shop that sold rope and brass and marine paint, whose owner had once been pulled out of the water by Ansel's father and had never afterward asked anybody in that family a single question. It was warm, and it smelled of tar and linseed, and the light came off the water and moved on the ceiling all day. Dr. Odile Mazur arrived at 4:30, with an expression that got worse in stages. She was a small, brisk, gray woman of 60, who had looked after this family for 9 years, without once being pleasant about it. She took Isora's hands and turned them over, and looked at her feet a long time, and asked her to walk 4 steps across the room, and watched her do it, and something happened in her face that Ansel did not like at all. Then she came out onto the landing and shut the door. How long has she been like this? She said. Since the middle of October. And how long have you known? Since about noon. Whatever she saw was enough, because she let it go. Right, she said. I will say this once, and plainly. Because you are a man who deals better with plain, That is heavy metal neuropathy. The distribution in her hands and feet is textbook. The hair loss is textbook. And if you tell me she has a laboratory report on a foodstuff, then, I believe, the laboratory report. Somebody has been giving her a dose every day since the autumn, calibrated, and whoever it is has done reading, because the amount that will kill a woman of her size in one go is not much, and they have deliberately never given it to her. They wanted it slow. They wanted it to look like a wasting illness with a psychiatric component, and they have very nearly got one. Odile folded her arms. There is an antidote, a compound called Prussian blue. It binds the metal in the gut so that it leaves the body instead of going round again, and it is not exotic. Started in November, she would have been walking normally by Christmas. And started today. She keeps her life. And I am not a confident person. She does not keep everything else. The nerve damage in her feet is months old and some of it is permanent, which means the numbness stays, which means she will be looking at the ground for the rest of her life. Her kidneys have taken a beating. She is 20 pounds under where she should be, and I intend to be extremely tedious about that. Ansel had his hand flat against the wall of the landing. Say the rest of it, he said. The rest of it, Odile said, is that she has been running her own case since the autumn on instant coffee and salt crackers because she could not trust a doctor in the city, and I have been that doctor for 9 years, and she was right not to. That is not a thing I am going to enjoy for the rest of my life. She picked up her bag. First dose here by 7. Nobody else touches anything that goes into her mouth. Not the shop downstairs, not your driver, not you. Understood? And Ansel, she stopped at the top of the stairs. The fact that it stopped is not good news. Whoever was doing it has had 6 weeks to think about a woman walking around this city with a body full of evidence. I would find her before they do. Except you have. So now I would think very carefully about what they do next. The dose came at 7:10, a capsule, the color of ink that was, Odile said, going to make everything worse for 2 days before it made anything better. At 2 in the morning, Ansel found her out of bed. She had got as far as the table by the stove, dragging the blanket, and she had the shoebox open and was sorting the laboratory sheets into 3 stacks with the side of her hand, because her fingers would not pinch. Dr. Mazur will kill you, he said. Dr. Mazur has gone home, and she will find out that I did something useful at 2 in the morning. Isora did not look up. Sit down. I need your eyes, because mine keeps sliding. He sat down. They worked for 3 hours. It was the first thing they had ever done together. 3 winters in a house with 50 rooms, 400 shared meals, a wedding, a funeral, 11 pages of a lease, and not one evening in which the 2 of them had sat at a table and tried to solve the same problem. Look at the concentrations, she said. Not the caddy, mine. The same laboratory does occupational health series, and it never occurred to them to wonder why a woman in this city was posting them her own. She lined 4 sheets up. November, December, January, February. What do you see? They go up, not smoothly. Look at the middle of January. He looked. There was a trough in it, a dip of nearly a third across 10 days. I was home, he said slowly. The Rotterdam thing collapsed, and I was in the house for 9 days straight, and the dose came down by a third. Then you went to the hearings, and it went back up past where it had been, as if somebody were making up lost ground. That happens 4 separate times. It tracks your diary. Ansel, whoever is doing this, is not a servant with a grudge. It is somebody who knows where you are on any given morning, and who is careful when you are at home because they are afraid of you. The stove ticked. Then we get something else. There is only one, Isaura said. The tin. Not the caddy, the tin. The caddy proves a poisoned substance. Was in my room. The tin proves it arrived poisoned. If Velacour sent that tin to that kitchen door on the 1st of March with a delivery note and a signature, then it did not happen inside your house. It happened before it got there, and one of 9 employees signed for it. Halloran, Ansel said. She looked up sharply. Valacor imports through the North Key, Ansel said. Every crate over that quay is manifested through the Halloran office. Emmerich has the shipping records for that company going back years, in a room I have never been allowed into. And Emmerich Halloran, Isora said slowly, sent you a key this morning. Yes. Which means he already knows. Yes. She was quiet for a long moment. She had gone very still, and her hand had stopped moving on the papers, and she was looking at the black window. Ansel, she said. There is something I have to tell you before you go anywhere near that man, and I would like to do it in an order of my choosing and not his. Then tell me. Not tonight, wise Siura. Not tonight, she said, because I have been awake for 20 hours, and I have taken a substance that is currently making the floor move, and because if I say it badly, you will not hear the second half. Tomorrow. He should have pushed. He knew that afterward, and for a long time afterward. Instead, she tried to stand, and her legs went, and he came round the table fast, and caught her under the arms, and for a second, she was against him, with her forehead on his collarbone, and her whole weight in his hands, which was nothing at all. I am not frightened of dying, she said into his shirt. You keep looking at me as though I am. I have had 6 months to get used to it. What frightens me is that I will die on a Tuesday afternoon with nothing but a shoebox, and you will go on being a man with a brother, and he will stand at the top of those stairs with his hand on your shoulder, and it will have cost him nothing. That will not happen, Ansel said. You cannot promise that. No, he agreed. So I will not. He put her back in the bed. At 6, he came out of the bathroom with his shirt half buttoned and found her awake watching the ceiling. I am going to the quay, he said. I know. The pistol is in the pocket of that coat. The chandler downstairs has a shotgun older than both of us, and he knows how to use it. Dr. Mazur comes at 9. If anybody knocks who is not one of those two, you do not open it. Ansel, he stopped in the doorway. Whatever he tells you about me, Isara said, it will be true. I want you to know that before you hear it. Because he is going to enjoy the part where you find out, and I would like to take that away from him if I can. The North Quay at first light smelled of diesel and salt and the sour green weed on the pilings, and it was quiet in a way the south side never was, because everything on the Halloran side ran to a clock. They were expecting him. The gate stood open, and a man in a wax coat walked him the length of the quay without speaking, past the ranks of blue containers to a low brick building, where the light was already on. Emmerich Halloran was at a plan chest, with his sleeves rolled, working at a roll of drawings, and did not look up until he was finished. He was 62 and built like a bosun, white hair cropped to the skull, with the forearms of a man who had actually worked, which he had, before his father died, and made it unnecessary. He and Ansel had sat across a table from each other a dozen times in 3 years, and had never once been in a room alone. Sit down, Emmerich said. There is coffee. I will drink from the same pot first if you like, since that is where we are. I will stand. Suit yourself. You have signed it, Emmerich said. That was 14 hours ago, and it has not been entered. It was entered at 4 yesterday, by a clerk with 3 children in private school. Emmerich drank his coffee. You gave away the Deepwater lease, in a stairwell over a shoebox. I have been in this business for 41 years, and I have never heard of anything like it. And I do not mind telling you it kept me up. I want the Velacor manifests, Ansel said. Everything through your key with that name on it, and every hand delivery note out of that warehouse for 2 years. And I want the tin that went to my kitchen door on the 1st of March, traced back to whoever signed the release on it. Emmerich Halloran set his cup down. You can have all of it, he said. It has been boxed since Thursday. 4 years ago in the spring, he said. I went looking for a woman. Ansel did not move. The war had been going a decade, and neither of us could win it, and everybody knew a treaty was coming, and everybody knew a treaty would come with a marriage in it, because they always do. They would want somebody with no connections. Foreign, clean, No cousins in this city who could ever be leaned on. He drank. So, I thought then, that is what I will build them. You placed her, Ansel said. I found her, Amaric said. There is a difference, and it will matter to you later. She was living in a rented room out past your rail yards, 26 years old, born in this city, and she had lost a brother in it. He was 22. He worked on a fuel barge. He was not in the business. He was not anybody's soldier. He was a boy with a job and somebody decided that barge was carrying something it was not carrying, and it went up at the mouth of the cut at 4 in the morning. And they buried what they had in a box the size of a hat box. The room had gone very quiet. She had spent 3 years by then trying to find out who gave that order, which is a thing an ordinary person cannot do, because ordinary people have no way in. She had written to the port authority. She had sat in the public gallery at the inquest and heard it called an accident. And then a man came to her door and said, I can put you inside that house, and you will have to give up your name and your papers and your grandmother and every friend you have ever had, and you will have to live there and smile at them, and in exchange you will be in the only room in this city where that question gets answered. And she said yes. She said yes in under a minute, Emeric said. I have never seen anything like it before or since. The papers were mine, Emeric went on. The birth record, the references, the whole biography, built in 11 weeks. And good enough that your lawyer verified it in an afternoon. The brokers were mine, although they did not know it. And the arrangement was that she would tell me what she found. Not sabotage, not poison, not fire, nothing so crude. I wanted eyes at that table, that is all I ever wanted. And I have never been ashamed of it. How long did she report? 22 months, she was superb. And then in the autumn of the second year, she stood roughly where you are standing, and told me she was finished. I asked whether she had found her answer, and she said she had. And I asked what it was. And she said it was not mine to have. I said, you understand that I made you? She said yes. I said, you understand that I can unmake you in a morning? She said yes, and thank you for the years, and walked out of that door, and she has not spoken to me since. Emmerich picked his coffee back up. So, he said, somewhere in her second winter in your house, your wife found out who gave the order on that barge, and whoever it is was close enough to you that she decided the safest thing she could do with the answer was, carry it out of this room and never put it down. Not for me, not for the Port Authority, and not for you either, since she has evidently not told you, or you would not be standing in my office at 6 in the morning with a face like that. He drank. That is who you married, he said. A woman who spent 3 years in your house under a false name for the purpose of identifying a killer, found him, and then chose to protect the house she was sent to burn. Ansel discovered that he had sat down. Why send the key, he said. Because she is dying, Emeric said. And I am not a good man, and those two facts have been in the same room in my head since March. Ruzina Aldous is her grandmother, and she has been on my payroll for 4 years, which is how I kept the old woman fed while her granddaughter was pretending to be somebody else across the water. When Isara came home in March, sick, and told her nothing at all, the old woman came to me, and I sat on it for 6 weeks, weighing it. If she died quietly of a wasting illness, the lease went whole to you, and your house doubled overnight, and my grandchildren inherit another war. If she died in your house, it was the same. And if I did nothing, then the only person left alive who knew what she knew would be the person who put it in her, and that person would own this harbor inside 2 years. You could have written me a letter. I could have written you a letter in December, Emeric agreed, and you would have read it in the study with your brother standing behind you, and decided it was a Halloran trick, and you would have been dead by summer, and so would she. He shrugged. Once, heavily. Take the boxes. They are on the pallet by the door. Take the coffee, too. And Ansel. Ansel stopped in the doorway. There is a thing in those manifests you will find in about an hour. Emmerich said, and I am going to give it to you now because I do not want you finding it in a car park. The hand deliveries out of Velacour to your kitchen door stopped on the 1st of March. There has not been one since. Whoever it is stopped 6 weeks ago, which is 3 weeks before she walked out of your house. The floor moved under Ansel for the second time in 2 days. 3 weeks before, he said. They stopped before she ran, Emmerich said, which means they were not stopping because she ran. They stopped because they had already decided that the slow way was finished. He turned back to his drawings. You have had a great deal of luck this week, he said, and none of it is yours. Go home. Bram had the car door open before Ansel was 10 feet from the building. Boss, his face was wrong. The chandler called the gate. She is fine. But she has gone. When 25 minutes ago? She came down the stairs on her own and said she was going to the harbor board and that I was not to be called until she was in the taxi. She left a letter and took the shoebox. Bram was talking fast. She was not taken, he is certain. She walked out of her own accord with your ring in her hand. Ansel got into the car. He read it at the first set of lights, once, because he did not need twice. You will be back by 8, it said, and you will have heard all of it, and you will want to protect me, and protecting me is the one thing that has never worked. The board sits at 9. Your seat is in my hand, and there is a rule, which I have read and you have not, that a holder of a seat may lay a matter before the board in person, and it must be minuted, and it must be heard. That is all I have ever wanted. Not a court, not a conviction, a minute, in a book, in a room with witnesses in it that says a name out loud. After that, it does not matter what happens to me, because things said in front of people cannot be unsaid. You gave me the ring. I have never once regretted marrying you, and I regret very much that this is how you find that out. The board, Ansel said. Now, that is the wrong side of the water at this hour. Boss, the bridge will be, Bram. They made it in 19 minutes. The harbor board sat in a chamber above the fish market, green leather, and bad heating, and a gallery nobody had used since the 1960s, and Ansel came up those stairs, 3 at a time, and through the double doors, at 11 minutes past 9. Isara was standing at the long table. She had put on the coat she had worn to his father's memorial, and she had the shoebox open in front of her, and the exercise book beside it, and she was holding the edge of the table in a grip that would have looked casual to anybody who did not know what her hands did now. The Halloran delegation was at the back, 2 men and a woman, all 3 sitting forward. Sabin was at the near end of the table, in a beautiful gray suit. Of course he was. He had held the family's proxy on that board for 4 years, and everybody liked him, and he was sitting with his pen, uncapped, and his face arranged into concerned and slightly embarrassed patience. The face of a decent man, watching a family tragedy unfold in public and wishing he could stop it. Mr. Chairman, Sabin was saying, I am not going to obstruct my sister-in-law. I would only ask the board to consider that she has been very unwell for some months, and that she filed for divorce from my brother a fortnight ago. I have nothing but sympathy, and I want that minuted too. It is minuted, said the chairman. Sabin capped his pen. Isora, I am not your enemy. I know, Isora said. That is what has made it so difficult. She turned to the board. On the 1st of every month for years, she said, a sealed tin has been hand-delivered to the kitchen door of the Dragomir house by a company called Velacour Trading. It is used to fill 1 caddy in 1 room used by 1 person. I have a report from an independent laboratory dated the 15th of March on the contents of that caddy, and I would like it read into the minute. She held up the sheet with the red flag on it, and her hand shook, and she did not apologize. I have 4 occupational health reports on my own samples, showing the same metal accumulating in me. I have a share register, showing that 60% of Velacour Trading is held by the man at the end of this table. And I have, coming through that door in a box, 2 decades of shipping manifests from the North Key, with the release signatures on them. The room had stopped moving. The lease, she said. Reverted to escrow yesterday afternoon. Neither house holds it. There is nothing left in this city worth killing me for, which makes me the only person in this room, with nothing to gain by standing here. And I would like that minuted as well. The chairman was looking past her. Two of Ansel's men had come in behind him with the first of the boxes. Sabin looked at the boxes, and then at the door, and then at his brother's face. And something went out of him all at once, the way air goes out of a thing, and what was left was not a decent man at all. He came out of the chair fast. He was not going for Ansel. Ansel understood that as it happened and would think about it for years. He went for the shoebox, for the paper, because he was a lawyer to the bone, and even at the end his instinct was that the paper was the danger, and Isara was standing between him and it. He got a hand into her coat and drove her backward into the edge of the table. Ansel crossed that room. He would not afterward remember any part of the crossing. He took his brother off her and put him into the paneling hard enough to split it. And Sabin went down onto one knee, and every member of the board was on their feet shouting. And Sabin, on one knee, with his hand going inside his beautiful gray jacket. Isara shot him. She had the pistol out of the coat pocket where Ansel had left it that morning, and she had it in both hands because one would not do, and she was braced back against the table, and the round went in below his collarbone and took him over sideways onto the green carpet. The noise in that room afterward was enormous, and then very quickly not. Sabin lay on his side, making a sound. The gun he had been reaching for was still in the holster under his arm, and one of the Halloran men took it out with 2 fingers and laid it on the table and stepped back with his hands where everyone could see them. Isara let the pistol fall out of her hands onto the carpet, because she could not have opened her fingers any other way. Ansel got to her. I have got you. I know. Are you hit? No. She was staring at her brother-in-law on the floor. Ansel. He was not going to shoot you. He was going to shoot the box. The deliveries had stopped 6 weeks ago. Ansel understood it then, kneeling on green carpet with his hand in her hair. The slow way had been finished since the 1st of March, and this was what had been waiting behind it. Sabin lived. That was the thing nobody in the family ever quite forgave her for, and the thing Ansel came over a long time to understand she had done deliberately. She had had the second shot, and the angle, and a room full of witnesses who would have called it anything she wanted, and she let the gun fall instead. He was taken out of the chamber on a stretcher, and then, days later, into a room in the federal building with a prosecutor on one side of the table and 2 decades of Velicor manifests on a trolley between them. The release signature on the tin of the 1st of March was his own. He had signed 41 of them personally, which is what happens when a careful man decides the only truly safe hands are his own. It came out in the autumn that the barge at the mouth of the cut had been Sabin's as well, a false report to a crew of his own men, meant to provoke a Halloran reprisal at a moment when his brother was hesitating. A boy on a barge. Nobody's soldier, a lever. Isara sat through every morning of it in a gallery nobody had used since the 1960s, and walked in on her own feet, looking at the ground. The hair came back in the summer, fine and dark and standing up like a boy's, and she was rude about it. The feet never came back. She learned the stairs on the quay and then the stairs at the fish market, and once in November she went down on the wet cobbles outside the rope shop and sat there laughing in a way that frightened him more than the fall. The house was sold in the spring. All of it, 50 rooms, the marble, the long staircase, the walnut frame that had never been made. Vesna Dragomir took a flat above the old harbor and did not speak to her son for 7 months, and then began to, starting with a phone call about a plumber. Ansel had the east rooms stripped before the sale and everything in them burned in the yard, and did it himself over 2 days, and did not let anybody help him. He kept one thing. The caddy went to the federal building in an evidence bag and never came back, but the cracked white saucer sat afterward on a windowsill above the water, with a wedding ring in it that neither of them had yet decided what to do with. A year and a day after, A man on a bicycle brought a brass key to a gate. Ansel drove her out to the breakwater. It was cold and the light was going, and the water was doing the thing it does at that hour, going from gray. She had a stick now, an ugly aluminum one she refused to replace on the grounds that an ugly stick was harder to lose. And she stood at the rail in his coat, because she still never brought one. "I have an answer for you," Ansel said. "To what?" "You asked me a question at this rail 3 winters ago," he said. "You asked whether I actually liked the sea or whether I had only been born beside it. And I did not answer you, because I thought you were making conversation, and I thought I had married a stranger." Isora went very still beside him. "You remember that," she said. "I have thought about it every day for a year." He put his hands on the rail. "The answer is that I do not know. I have never once been out on that water for a reason that was not cargo. My grandfather came in on it. My father made money off it. I fought a war over the right to charge people for it. And in 9 years I never went out past the light for a single afternoon. So I do not know whether I like it. I would like to find out slowly, with somebody who asks that kind of question, if she is still interested in the answer." The wind came up off the water. "I am not your wife," Isara said. "You signed that on a shoebox. And the lease is in a drawer at the board for another 9 years, so there is no treaty and no hinge, and nothing holding either of us to anything at all. That is correct. So what am I?" Ansel leaned back against the rail so he could look at her. "You were a clause," he said. "My mother's word, I heard her say it in a room with a painter in it, and I did not correct her, and I have had a year to be sick about that. And then you were a woman who kept a house standing that had been trying to kill her, and gave away a harbor to make herself worthless, and stood up in a green room and said a name out loud with a shaking hand. There is no arrangement in the world large enough to contain that. So, I am not going to offer you one. I am asking you to stay because you want to, and for no other reason. And if the reason ever stops, you can take the ugly stick and go, and I will drive you." Isora looked out at the water for a long time. "That is the worst offer I have ever received," she said. "There are no terms in it at all. None. My grandmother will want a wedding. Your grandmother has already ordered a cake. I know, because she asked me to carry it up the stairs." Isora laughed, and it turned into a cough, and he put his hand flat between her shoulder blades until it stopped, and left it there. Then she took his hand off her back and held it, badly, with fingers that did not close properly and never would, and turned back to the water beside him. "Then take me out past the light," she said, "and we will find out." Ansel Dragomir gave away a harbor on the lid of a shoebox in a stairwell that smelled of geraniums, and he did it in 11 seconds, and never once asked for it back. That is what makes this one land, for me. He did not save her with an army, he saved her by signing away the only thing he had ever wanted, and then by getting out of the way and letting her walk into that room and say it herself. If you loved this one, and you want more slow burn stories, where the quiet one has been holding the whole house up the entire time, go ahead and like this video, subscribe, and share it with somebody who needs it today. And tell me down in the comments, what was the exact moment you knew Isora was going to win? See you in the next one.